Okay, we are in Genesis 20 tonight, and we are now live on the internet for the whole world to see. Genesis chapter 20. Connie and Robert are sharing their phone, and when they go to the malt shop, they get one malt, two straws, right? Genesis chapter 20. We're going to read the first 8 verses to start. Now Abraham journeyed, from there to toward the land of the Negev, and settled between Kadesh and Shur. Then he sojourned in Gerar. Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." So Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is married." Now Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, you will slay a nation, even though blameless? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister,' and she herself said, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that in the integrity of your heart you have done this. And I also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech arose in the early morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their hearing, and the men were greatly frightened. Okay, what do we think about the first 8 verses of this story?
You know, you thinking about this, I'm wondering if this is following the last chapter that we read, or whether this is a different time of story. For example, Sarah is 90 years old. Why would King Abimelech want someone that age?
The king of Gerar, his name is Abimelech. That's a good point.
She was a good looking 90.
Huh?
She was a good looking 90.
Well, she must have been. I'm not gonna
Be
go
careful, be
there.
careful. Me Too movement is fully still in force, Mark, so let's be careful.
This story is so much like Egypt.
It's very similar.
Same thing basically happened. It seems to me like it might not be in the same time. Maybe it is. I obviously don't know. I'm still back to the point. A 90-year-old woman being attracted to a king. Unless
You'd like to see that woman, I guess is what you're saying.
well,
Keep an eye on him, Karen.
I know. Maybe I probably got myself into trouble. You're helping me.
Yeah.
See that, but it just seems like it isn't the right time.
Okay, it's an interesting story on the chronology of the thing, that Sarah is now, within the very cusp of giving birth to Isaac, meaning she's well advanced in age, and also even a good-looking 90-year-old woman is well past childbirth, and the king isn't taking a wife. That's why he wants more kids. So it's a story where I guess you could say looks are deceiving, and sometimes words are deceiving too, aren't they? And sometimes great men of faith are deceiving too. So,
Well, again, you touch that great men of faith, and it's very interesting that throughout the Bible, the people that are held up as pillars of faith are not Well, they're not perfect. And even their great faith is not that great sometimes, obviously with Abraham.
And everybody has their weak points and breaking points. I mean, at some point, if it's a certain area, maybe weaker in some regards than the other. The gist of the story puts, once again, God's promise to Abraham at risk. You know, that God has made this assurance and told him it will be Sarah. And now it's clear, it's clear now that exactly what Abraham is doing, what is at stake. Because when he's in Egypt, I guess you could say that it could be, but through another woman, God keeps his promise to Abraham. But here he said it will be Sarah. And by surrendering her without a fight, in fact, almost, please take her, don't hurt me, that approach, he is taking what God has promised and putting it at risk. Now, we know the risk is not great, but that's the kind of the scene of the story. To a first-time reader, first-time hearer, he is endangering the ability for God to keep this promise. Because if Sarah sleeps with another man, it's beyond the issues of the propriety of all that and everything. How do we know the child she has is not his, Abimelech's? They didn't have Maury Povich. You couldn't go on TV and you are not the father, or you are the father. They didn't have that back then. So this would put that at risk, and it's coming again after we know for certain. As it follows, and the story of chapter 19, which is the story of Lot, which concludes with Lot fathering children through his daughters. You put that in here, and it certainly kind of brings us back. Okay, we're off Lot now. We're back with Abraham. But it also shows just perhaps the unlikeliness, of God's promise being kept. That it's just constantly, the walk of faith is one where everything is uncertain. We try to reduce uncertainty in our walks of faith. We try to find proof, indicia that God's word is true. And here's why we know it's true, because we can verify it. We can absolutely prove it. God prophesied this about this kingdom, and this happened to them, and this bridge is under this ocean now, but it shows that everything God said was, archaeological, historical proof. And our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, didn't have that. They didn't have that available to them. They were blazing new trails for us to follow, and believed and then disbelieved at times, and acted out of courage. This is the same Abraham that gets between God and evil people and argues on behalf of the evil people. A very courageous act by Abraham. And this is the same Abraham that, once again, this is evidently a pressure point. I like Sarah. I love her, but I don't want to die for her, evidently. Is that what you want your husbands to feel like, ladies? We've got this tree. I guess I don't know what kind of fruit or whatever's falling off of it, but it keeps hitting the roof of our duplex there. And Sherry figured out we were hearing this noise, and she figured out that's what it was. But, I don't know how many times I'll be laying there at night and I'll get an elbow. I heard a noise, which is, you get up and go find out what that noise is. I never get to lay there, hear a noise, and go, Sherry, get up and see what the noise is. That's not how it works. So it wouldn't work very well. And so, there's this, we like to think of our men being chivalrous and willing to lay their lives down to protect their women. And maybe if push came to shove, Abraham would have been willing to do it, but it doesn't look like it. And once again, sometimes and if you see how the story turns out, you can almost think, well, Abraham knew exactly what he was doing. But I don't think it's presented in that context. I don't think this is designed to make Abraham look good from our perspective, what we would think was good. I think this is fear, and he's acting out of fear.
You, in your notes, you said that his faith failed him at this time, and he acted in fear. I don't know, it may be just somatics or something, but his faith didn't fail him. He failed his faith, or you know what I'm trying to say? He didn't have enough faith. If he had the faith, it wouldn't have failed him.
I don't understand what you're saying. I think if you're talking about believing that God exists, I don't think Abraham wavered in that. Believing God was going to take care of him and acting upon that belief. And I think that's, this is kind of getting a little bit far afield, but what is faith? And faith is not a mental acknowledgement of something. The demons believe and shudder. Faith is relying upon your belief.
And if he had appropriate faith, he wouldn't have done this. It's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
That it wasn't that the faith failed. It was that Abraham failed by not having enough faith.
Well,
He also, when he was in Egypt, and when we were talking about when he was in Egypt and he came out of there and stuff, he went in there and actually he got kind of rewarded for doing this thing down in Egypt. I mean, he ended up coming out of Egypt a wealthy person after kind of, I don't know if I would say it, playing this trick on the Pharaoh. And now it's kind of a repeated kind of thing here. And I don't know,
yes. It's the repetition. Okay, let's get settled with the whole faith issue. Abraham is doing what God has told him generally out of faith, right? He's picked up, left his family, and he is sojourning out of faith. During that sojourning, as he is sojourning, his fear at times takes over, supersedes the faith. Now, you can say he didn't have enough faith, but that's still saying his faith failed him. His faith was too weak. His faith was insufficient.
I think what it is putting the blame on the wrong thing. The blame should be on Abraham, where faith is what God gives us and lets us have. So it's not the faith's fault. It's Abraham's fault for not having the faith.
I guess that'd be a good way of explaining what I was trying to say. You know, we're putting the blame in your sentences where it says his faith failed him. Abraham failed the faith. He didn't, but anyway, like you say, we don't need to.
Okay, well, I think we are kind of defining the terms a little bit differently. I think we're basically saying the same thing. I'm not trying to exonerate Abraham in this at all.
No.
Well, we know you're not, but that was what he was trying to get at, that the blame, make sure you get it on the right person.
Okay, well, we'll have to, I guess, agree to disagree on how we define and interact all that. I'm not trying to exonerate Abraham, and I don't want people. I think an inaccurate interpretation of the scripture is that God wanted Abraham to lie about this relationship, that this was part of God's plan, that it was part of God's plan for Abraham to lie to Pharaoh, that it's part of God's plan for Isaac to lie about Rebekah. That it was part of God's plan for Jacob to deceive his brother, to deceive his father, that these things were all part of God's plan. And one way to get to that, I think, mistaken understanding is what Ed has pointed out, which is it turns out well. The result is, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. They're eating some really tasty pudding at the end of it. But I think instead of seeing that as God, as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, whatever, acting according to God's mysterious plan that we don't really know about, I think it's a better understanding to look at it and see God's power to redeem what is going on, what his called people have done. God can redeem it, even though it is not his original intention. God's people do not always do God's will. And I believe our faith, I understand our faith to be part of who we are. It's not something we can put down on paper necessarily, or exclusively, or entirely, but it is part of who we are. We believe and we unbelieve. Lord, I believe, help my disbelief. We have this mixture, places, if we don't absolutely disbelieve, places in our life where our faith is not as strong. Because how do we live? Do we live perfectly as people of faith in every area of our lives? Are we just as faithful in attending worship services as we are in how we handle our finances? In how we treat our neighbors who build a fence 2 feet onto our property? Are we, poor thing Sharon's going through right now and all that. Somebody brought a inheritance dispute to Jesus, and Jesus said, "You ain't dragging me into that." I'm not that stupid. I'm not getting into that, So these are everyday life. One of the things, what's the best thing that Americans do right now?
That's a good question.
Shop, right?
Oh, okay.
We don't do anything better than shop. But when we shop, do we shop with the idea of love of neighbor in how we shop? Or do we shop with, I'm going to squeeze every nickel I can out of what I'm buying? I'm going to get the absolute most, the absolute best deal for me out of everything I'm buying. Whereas shopping an area of our life where our faith, it doesn't really matter. God's not telling us to be faithful in how we buy our stuff. He wants us to be faithful in making sure we get there on church every time the doors are open. Not in how we treat our neighbor when we go to his store or her store. And we all have areas in our life where our faith is excellent, hopefully. We also have areas in our life where our faith, you're like, I can't do this because God hasn't given me enough. God hasn't given me enough to pay this price for this, even though it's a fair price for what I'm getting and from whom I'm getting it. I can't pay that for it. I can't pay $5 for a dozen eggs for my neighbor who raises chickens. I can't pay it. I can go down to the grocery store, get them on sale for 99 cents a dozen. I can't pay her $5 for a dozen. I mean, that's something I've always struggled with because I eat a lot of eggs. I like eggs. I eat a lot of everything. That's kind of my problem. But, so these are, when you look at what faith is and how it impacts us in every aspect of our life. Not just do we get off our rear ends and come to church when it's supposed to, but how does it affect us in every interaction we have with another human being? And how does it affect us in how we deal with all of our own personal items all the time? And I think when we do that, we can see that we all have areas of faith where we can grow, areas in which our faith can become stronger, where we can lean into it and let it motivate us and guide us more than it does now. And I am not exempting myself from that. And I just can't pay $5 for a dozen eggs. I can't do it. No. I was raised by a woman who would never pay $5 for a dozen eggs, I don't think. Maybe 4, but not 5. We got some folks here online. We got Roxy, Sherry, Kim, Nell, Mindy. Sherry wants you all to know it's walnuts that are falling on the roof and that it only happened one time. So there have been other noises, though, I can tell you that. So she's not too bad. So the relationship with God and Abimelech is interesting because you might have this presented at some point that Abimelech is being rapacious. He is being greedy. He is seeing a woman and just taking her because he wants another woman in his harem, basically. He protests his innocence, integrity of heart. God acknowledges the integrity of his heart. Now, how we look at this, again, all of these encounters between men and women that we see through our lens, is very different perhaps than how they saw them. Maybe we wouldn't see what he did with Sarah, just seeing a woman and saying, she's my wife, I want to take her. That doesn't sound real, full of integrity to us, does it? He didn't ask her out on a date. He didn't go with a chaperone. They didn't go see a G-rated movie and eat at, a place that doesn't serve alcohol for dinner and, all the stuff you're supposed to do along the way when you're courting a fine young Christian lady. He just saw her and he wanted her and he took her. And yeah, he was deceived, but really, he was being greedy. That's not what God said, huh? So some of these dynamics, it's really tough to completely divorce ourselves of our sensibilities, especially in terms of these types of relationships, because they're still, men and women still get together, don't they? I don't know why women put up with this, but some of them do. They still get together. So it's still very much a part of our existence, an important part of our existence. And so we're going to see these kind of through our lenses. And I don't say that to exonerate. I'm not saying he wasn't greedy. I'm not saying he wasn't lustful, whatever. But also the expectations. Abraham, he saw it coming, didn't he? They're going to want her. They see her, they're going to want her. God says you acted with integrity, and as a result, if you do all of these things, I won't kill you. Go to the man who lied to you and if ye get him to pray for you, you will live. Who was the last person who just flat out lied to you? Did you want to go to them and ask them to pray for you?
That doesn't seem to fit with the fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. What would be the point of going to the guy who's lying to me to pray for me? What good his?
And he says, "Oh yeah, I'll pray for you." Okay.
Well, that point too. Yeah.
Sure, I've been doing it all along. Yeah. If I told you I was a compulsive liar, would you believe me?
What's interesting is Abimelech evidently knew of God because he heeded his dream or word or however you want to say it, and quickly, righted it wrong. So, some reason, somehow or other, he knew who God was.
You're going to die.
And as to this interaction between Abraham and Abimelech, who is righteous?
Say that again.
As between just within the scope of this interaction, who is righteous? Abraham or Abimelech? Abimelech acts righteously.
Right.
He's told to go get the prayer from an unrighteous man and pray for him. Oh, but the Bible is so straightforward. It's just right there. You just found it.
Is this the only place Abraham's called a prophet?
I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. He is a prophet.
I don't recall it anywhere else. I was a little surprised.
That's a good question. But if you do not restore her, you will die, and you and all who are yours. All these other, you're blameless in how you took him and took Sarah. You'll die, and all your people will die. Capital punishment for the lot of you, even though you acted with integrity in your heart. You got to go get that liar to pray for you. I knew an old lady once who said, they'll say he used to drink, they'll say he used to chase women, but they'll never say he used to lie. If someone lies to you, they're always a liar, right? Go ask that prophet to pray for you.
Straighten it out. Well, she actually is my sister.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But,
Sorry.
that's okay. And all the men were greatly frightened at the end of it. All these guys. It's in the Isaac Rebecca story, I think, where it says any one of us might have taken her, you know. Okay, well, that shows a difference in relationship between men and women right now, can't you? That the man can just take whoever he wants, and maybe it's not as different now. Maybe it should. We, hopefully, God-fearing, God-believing people believe it should be different now. But I mean, with some of these allegations that have come forth in the last few years, we're seeing that wealthy and powerful men may still be living by that ethos. I want it or I take it. Did you have something, Connie?
I was just wondering, it says that, he healed Abimelech, and he also healed his wife and female slaves so that they were children. So you wonder how long this was. It had to be long enough that they would notice they weren't being able to bear children.
Okay, well, you're getting ahead too. You and Mark are skipping. I'm going too slow for y'all tonight, and probably for some other folks. So it is definitely the plague that besets Abimelech's house is tied directly to what Abraham and Sarah have gone through, isn't it? The barrenness that they've experienced is now being visited upon this whole house. They've gotten in the middle of their plight. Unbeknownst to them, they brought this on, and they brought it on themselves. Let's read verses 9 through 13. Y'all are, I believe it's actually said champing at the bit rather than chomping at the bit, but I always say chomping because I never said champing. Verse 9, excuse me, then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us, and how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what have you encountered that you have done this thing? Abraham said, because I thought, surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came about when God caused me to wander from my father's house that I said to her, this is the kindness which you will show me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother. So, kind of a weird story. It doesn't stop being weird now, does it? I mean, she's his half sister. So, I don't care what state of the union you go to right now, that is illegal. So, don't get any ideas. But it's an interesting Abraham's response. First of all, I think it's interesting. Abimelech, you have brought sin on us. You have caused us to sin. And God's people, I think, especially when we're not faithful or when we don't live according to God's guidance for us, we can cause others to sin. When we shoot people coming into or out of an abortion clinic because we think abortion is wrong, Does that cause others to sin? Does that cause other people to maybe feel more sympathy towards the abortionists? That's kind of an extreme example, but when we sin, it doesn't just stop with us. The sin is not just, it's not like it's wholly within ourselves. It always affects somebody else. And this great man of God sins, and a whole group of people who are acting the best of their knowledge have now come under the judgment of God, haven't they? So Abraham is going to touch lives. We all touch lives, whether we know it or not. The people that study these things talk about how when you're in rush hour traffic, if someone gets on their brakes, especially when they don't really need to, the accordion effect it has and how much worse it makes the commute. One person is stopping a whole lot of people behind him, and they have to stop people behind them, and on and on. I'm not saying it's a sin to step. If you think you need to get on your brakes, get on your brakes. Right, Terry? Is that correct? As a professional driver, if you got to get on your brakes, get on your brakes. But that's the ripple effect. Is that what they call the butterfly effect? I'm not sure if that's what. There was a song called Butterfly Kisses, and then there was a movie called The Butterfly Effect, and I don't know if they have anything to do with each other or not. But that's, we just, no matter how we live, no matter how we socially distance, no matter what our existence is, it impacts the lives of others. Jesus says, do you want to heal or do you want to kill? He doesn't say, do you want to leave alone and not have any impact whatsoever? Do you want to heal or do you want to kill? So Abimelech is, at the stage of possibly death because of Abraham's choice. And Abraham's response isn't that, well, God wanted me to do this, so you would pay me. This was all part of God's mysterious plan. No, Abraham, I was scared. You're a bunch of heathens. So I didn't think it hurt to lie to heathens, I guess. And I thought you would kill me and take her anyway. And, technically she is my sister, whatever you may think about that. And this was our running con. This is how we get through life. This isn't an isolated incident. We know at least one other case of it. Evidently, this was as they journeyed, as they sojourned. Whenever we come to a place, tell them I'm your brother. We think it's bad that it happened twice. How many times did it happen? Is that how Abraham got rich? And the story of Egypt, is that a way you teach someone not to lie, to reward them when they lie? I was watching a show last night about what they call the everyone gets a trophy culture, where if you go out for the sports team, they don't keep scoring the games, and everybody gets a trophy at the end of the season, and how that is the reason all these college students are out rioting right now. Now, you may agree with that, you may disagree with that, but that's why they're out, because all they've done their whole life, anytime they participated in anything, they were told how great they were at it and given a trophy for it. I got maybe 1 or 2 trophies out of 15 or 20 years of competing in something resembling athletics. I didn't get them very often, but I wasn't very good. And look how I turned out, I guess. A little bit of encouragement. We all need some encouragement at times, don't we? We all need to teach our children. You may not be the best baseball player, but if you go out and you work at it, you try, you can become the best baseball player you can be. And that's good enough. But that doesn't mean you won a trophy. That doesn't mean you met an objective standard, which is you have to win these games. And we're going to keep score. So Abraham could say, she really is my sister, and that's his truth. And it is true. But that's not the question that was being asked of him, was it? Objectively. The question is, can I marry her? And the answer should have been, no, she's my wife. All this other stuff is all, but Abraham's been rewarded for it already in Egypt. He plundered Egypt with it. And he's about to plunder Abimelech with it. Verses 14 through 18. Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham and restored his wife Sarah to him. Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you. Settle wherever you please. To Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, it is your vindication. Before all who are with you and before all men you are cleared. Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maids so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So Sarah ain't having babies, ain't nobody having babies. But here it is, once again. The reward to the one who lied. Is that what you teach your kids whenever they lie or steal or something? You make sure they get a whole bunch extra to go along with it?
Let's make sure they get a whole bunch of extra.
If Mark had tried something like that, his dad would have given him a whole bunch extra right on the backside, huh, Mark?
Yes, sir.
With a knotted plow line. Did you ever get whooped with a knotted plow line?
No, I didn't, but his hand was sufficient.
Okay. The hand of correction.
Yeah.
So that's, this is, again, I think and I'm going to say this and I'll let y'all kind of wrap us up, but from us, we look at this from a moral standpoint, the morality of Abraham, how it fails, how it succeeds at times, how the right thing and the wrong thing. And then we try to just take the story. And a lot of times when we present it, we just twist it like crazy to try to make it say the right thing, to make it say the thing that suits our morals, suits the morals that we believe we get from God. And we do. But this story is not so much about morality. It's about calling. And despite all of these things, Abraham is still deeply and powerfully called. No matter how many times he fails, he cannot get rid of this calling. God has called him. He has accepted it. He's going to stumble. He's going to fall. He makes mistakes. He hurts other people. But he's still called.